Sorry, didn't mute. Sorry, I was muting myself again. So the video did work. You can expect the videos to be put up on Canvas a few hours after the classes ended. Um, so basically, once I stop the WebEx meeting, the the video will be created, and I'll get it up on YouTube, and I'll get the link, and I'll make a module here at the bottom of our sorry, not web, our Canvas class, and I'll just have a video, a section down here for lecture videos. But in any case, um, I was saying that some students were saying they had a preference for certain days to come in and certain days to go on WebEx, and whatever your preference is completely fine. Attendance is optional. Um, just make sure you deliver your projects on time. There's just no wiggle room on the deadlines because there's a whole feedback session with the students. So you either drop something or you don't, and you get feedback and you give feedback. Actually, it's a good point to just quickly mention is that giving good feedback is also part of your grade. So the Google survey is in a good state. It'll still go through a few more refinements, but once I'm really happy with it, I'll show it to you all. But all of you will be given, I don't know, 3 or 4, maybe 5 other students to review. So you read their posting, you watch their video of before and after, they explain what they did, then you play their games. If you need to, you play the before and then you play the after. But in either case, you have to review their work and like you as a gamer, what did you think about it? What did they change and why? So if it's the carding game and they train some AI characters, or if they decided to put some power ups or a jump feature, or if it's a first person shooter game, they have a new gun, or they expanded the level and added some more enemies, whatever it is, how did it improve the gaming experience? Um, what do you think about it? So you kind of have to critique it as a gamer and as a fellow developer. So the whole point is that constructive criticism. So no one ever achieves perfection, and we're in here to learn. You're gonna have to just show your stuff off and just deal with kind of that sharp edge of criticism. But the point is that you will be constructively criticized. You will give constructive criticism. It will be anonymous, so you don't have to feel like as a reviewer, like, oh my god, he's gonna see my name, he's gonna get mad at me, blah 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 blah. No, you will receive anonymous feedback on your game. You will give anonymous feedback. I will see who reviewed who because I will be randomly giving you groups of however many students to review, and I will grade you based on your feedback. So your project grade, we have 3 projects, right? Each is a third of your grade, so about 33%. Now, of that grade, a big part of it will be your feedback. I've yet to kind of hammer down on a number, but I'm thinking about a quarter or maybe even a third of your grade will be your feedback. So the point of that is that each project is a third of your total grade, 3 of them. Each project, maybe a quarter to a third, will be your feedback given to others. The reason that your feedback has such a rather large part of the grade is that it needs to be thought through. You need to put a good amount of time thinking about putting critical thought um, as you listen and read their stuff and play their games and be like, why did they do? What do I feel like it as a gamer? Did it increase the entertainment value? And then as a developer, you would think like, is this a smart choice? Was there a better way to do it? Did it add value to the gaming experience? And then you're going to fill out this survey, and the survey is going to have a bunch of what they call Likert type scale questions, like what did you think about their work? What did it increase the enjoyment? The aesthetics? What were these mechanics? Well, that's an open-ended question, but the Likert scale questions are very targeted, and then you scale from like 1 to 10, like poor to high, and then those Likert scale questions are grouped into like sections, themes about the work, and then you write up like why did you give these grades. So if you gave a bunch of high or relatively high scores in like three or four of the Likert scale questions, then there's like a follow up open ended question, and that's where the real um, that's where your real bulk of your thought needs to go. Like you need to actually spend time and write out why did you grade this project this way. Oh, well, I could see that they were really trying to push past like just a basic driving mechanic in this game, but the jump just didn't feel good. Like the space bar, the timing was a little off. It didn't give me didn't feel like that really quick response. It didn't feel like I was really in the game, really speedy, tappy. It was like kind of delayed and laggy. And the jump itself, like, what was the point? Like, it didn't help me. They didn't add any more barriers or rewards or risks just based on the jump mechanic. I was able to like jump off the board a few times and kill myself, but like, what's the point of that? Like, you just added a mechanic that didn't connect to more game features. Like, that's not the best. Like, like that's not a full complete mechanic. Like, that's the type of thought that'll go into it. And so what I do is I'm going to aggregate those open-ended responses anonymously, and they're going to go back to that person. So hopefully, like each of your games will be reviewed by, say, like four other students, and each student has like four kind of major talking points about your mod. And each talking point might be a paragraph, two or three. But in either case, you get a lot of feedback back, like what did you do right? What did you do wrong? It's okay to point out flaws, but you need to follow up with how to improve it. Like the jumping mechanic, like it went nowhere. Like what was the point of it? I kind of see where you were looking to go. Like there was these opportunities where I was able to like edge out on an AI character or maybe do a little bit of a shortcut in the lap if I jumped just right, or maybe I could see how I was almost able to reach a new type of power up or whatever it is, like connect it up, follow up a critique with how to improve. And it's okay to give criticism. This field, like all the companies we work at, says like, oh, it's such a blessing to get feedback. It's such a reward. And actually, as stupid as that sounds, I couldn't function in my field unless I was given constant feedback by the teams I work with and my other teammates. Like I just delivered a feature on these things called landmarks, how to scan landmarks with your phone, and like how to intuitively guide users through that process so that they can build their own little AR content around local physical objects in their living environment. But I hit dead ends all the time. Like I've been doing this for quite a while. I can really kind of riff, come up with new ideas on my own as I prototype. But if I didn't have like the hardcore engineers who know the platforms a little bit deeper to help guide me if I'm expressing their tech right or not, and if I didn't have like designers like who are just thinking more in contact with the users, helping me guide me like toward those direct. If I didn't have all these different points of perspective, and there's no way I'd come up with anything that's worthwhile because I'm not making something for me. I'm making stuff for other people. I'm making stuff for gamers or for users. Um, so the question is this at the end of the month or at the end of the semester? So project one is due October 8th. You must deliver something. This is why I want you to have a fallback and a stretch goals. I want you to, even if things go really poorly, you only deliver half as much or a simpler idea than you really wanted to, that's okay because at least you delivered something. That's not failure. Failure is delivering nothing. And delivering nothing also means, hey, I wasn't able to, something happened, I had an exam, I had this, I had that, can I have an extra week? No, there's no extra week. You got to drop something on this date. If something real happens, something really bad, get a note from the dean of students. I can work with you. Besides that, you're going to get a 0. You just have to deliver stuff. And the excuse of my computer died, I lost my files, Unity crashed on me doesn't work either. You got to be backing your stuff up. You have to prevent failure. So that means this type of feedback I'm talking about is 3 times for the semester. You will deliver a project on time. It's okay if it's smaller than you had originally scoped. At which point, once everybody delivers, I'll go through and randomly assign you students. You'll get an email, Canvas posting, some announcement. These are the links to your surveys to fill out for students X, Y, and Z. Go to the forum posting, go find their post, read it, download the games, play it, and then fill out the survey for each. And it's not a quick thing. It might take you an hour per student, which is why, or maybe take you 2 hours per student. It doesn't matter. But spend your time with it, and that's why the feedback part is a large part of your grade. Well, your project is what you actually deliver. You're going to get a larger part of your grade for, but you still have a substantial part of your grade for feedback. Again, I have to think about it, but a quarter to a third. And so again, once the time comes, once we get closer to the project delivery, the first one being October 8th, I'll get you more details. I'll show you what a sample survey looks like. I'll start explaining some of the more thought processes as you review other people's work. But this is like a critical skill, especially if you want to start working in small teams with game development toward the end of your collegiate career. You want to make some more elaborate stuff to get a portfolio going to, hopefully get in the industry. Knowing how to like effectively communicate how to improve a design or an engineering aspect and both give it and take it, that builds a level of trust with your teammates and to be able to receive that type of feedback that you're not you can't take things personally. And when you give it, you're obviously not trying to hurt that person. You're trying to improve their work. I've had students who really go out of their way to really try to bash other people, and that's what they think is criticism, constructive criticism. And it's something to learn. There's a very few people who kind of take a pleasure in kind of bashing people, but to be honest, they're not going to get very far in this field at all. And if so, you do approach or somebody is like that and gives you criticism, well, first off, I'm going to wipe it out. Like if someone just really rags on somebody and it's just not constructive criticism, I'm just going to delete your feedback, and you're going to get a poor feedback score, and that person's not going to see the bad, unworthwhile feedback. But even if you do get poor feedback, especially in like game jams, like when it's in a public situation, like I find it becomes more of a thing. People love like kind of tearing at other people. You just kind of have to, first off, that happens, get like a thick skin, just deal with it. But know that when you go into industry and you work for good places with good people, they actually seek to weed those people out. They will not make it through the interview process because companies don't want to work with people like that. There's no such thing as this like lone shark, lone wolf. Like, I'm so good, I'm a genius, I can make all these projects myself. It doesn't exist. And this type, you can't, there's too many facets to game development where you're like a genius. You're going to be really good in some areas, you're going to be poor in others. And everyone you work with is going to be the same way. So they have empathy. They know they've already dealt with this situation. They know themselves. They know that they're poor here and they're good here. And when they give feedback to people, they know that they're doing it to help them because they want the same back to them. And those are the people who actually make it professionally. So if you encounter people in college who really make you feel like crap, you're going to have to walk away from them and know that they're not going to succeed in real life, and don't let them change your mind about yourself. So this is why I just spend a lot of time on feedback. You got to get good on it. And it's like quick. And in the real world, it's like a lot, small amounts quickly as you iterate on development. It's just that we have like major kind of milestones. We just stop 3 times a semester. We review. The other good thing with feedback is if you really trying to push something more, you might want to push it into the next month, into the you continue one type of feature idea, one type of mechanic, because you got so much feedback and it just like opens up your head into new ideas, and you're like, oh my god, I never thought about X, Y, and Z and this and that. I'm gonna really push it again and again. Like this stuff, making nice, good, high quality design or engineering features is an instant. And so it's okay to spend the whole semester on something, getting multiple rounds of feedback on it. You haven't joined the Discord yet. That's all right. I'll send out the link expire. I'll send out the link again. I'll send out an announcement. It looks like somebody tried to send you another link to it. Let me know at the end of class if you still can't join Discord. I'll just send out another link. I'm just making sure that there's like nobody waiting. I don't think so. In the waiting room. Nope. All right. So does that kind of make sense? And what to expect 3 times for the semester for 3 project drops? You're going to make something and you're going to review maybe 4 other students. Then you can decide what you're going to make the next one. Online, is there any questions on that? That's the major structure of the class. All right. I think you start opening. Great. So just to wrap up where we were last class, I was going to review this VFX for this special gun. If you wanted to take a look at it, glasses steam up. We're in secondary scene. So I'm in first person shooter and secondary scene. And there was it the shotgun? I don't think so. No. Yeah, it's this launcher. Okay. So I'm just gonna click play real quick and just grab it and just shoot it, and then we'll start breaking down some aspects of the gun. So what the student really wanted to know about was when you shoot it and that bullet lands and it makes this spherical explosion, how does that work? Is it covered in any of those modding tutorials? That I'm not sure. So I'm in the secondary scene. So there's 2 gun pickups in here. I didn't pick up the shotgun. This is like a grenade launcher. Assets, FPS, scenes, and then secondary scene. No. So the subfolder, that's just the lighting baked out. So go up into scenes. There should just be a Unity. Secondary scenes has a little Unity icon. So I just want to find where the shotgun is. Stuck? Yeah, I'm stuck to the wall. I have to jump where? Good. Did it load me back into main scene? Yeah, it did. There. 1 second. Nice. Some zoom. I didn't. Did I fall down too far? Yeah, yeah. Is that control? Okay. Nice. All right. So it looks like you can do hotkeys or you can do middle mouse swipe. Yeah. All right. Nice. All right. So let's take a look at this thing. So, camera, first person socket. Let's see, we got the launcher. Need to get dual monitor. All right. So I guess all these weapons have just a big script at the root, the weapon controller. So all this stuff are publicly exposed variables. So it looks like you can use the same script, but you can change like a lot of special effects with the actual sublocations, like under the hierarchy here, where the gun muzzle, the speed, the spread. And it looks like it might be pretty easy to create a new gun. Maybe not the model, but a lot of the behavior can be tweaked right outside the box, right through this inspector. The behavior of the overheating, no audio source. Cool. So in the launcher, so you have the projectile prefab. And I think last time on Friday, I think we were talking about that this is, I don't know if this is one that moves out and a different one gets exploded at the end. But damage, this looks like why not the projectile that actually comes out. So you got a render on it. You got a projectile standard script. So how long it can live, how big is it, how fast is it moving. All right, it's got gravity on it, so it is like the grenade. Then as it moves out, the damage area, parameters exposed. So this is the trail of it. So trail render is, let me see if I move this thing, if it makes a trail. Yeah, that's that little, did it once and then it stopped. What's it? Oh, it disappears after a while. Looks like it got destroyed. Let me go back in there. The impact. All right, the disc range. I think this is what the explosion that happens when it lands. It hits a wall or a floor. Yeah. All right. Is the weapon itself a prefab? Yeah. All right, I can jump out. I can just look at the launcher and make my way through then. All right. Overheat cylinders. So disk orbit particles. All right, I don't know what, I'm gonna shoot the gun afterward to see when this rotating particle system happens, but it is interesting to at least this prefab right at its root has a particle system. So just to talk about particle systems for a minute, because eventually what the student wanted to get to was where the ending explosion happens, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be a particle system too. So under game object and effects, we have particle system here. So you can make like an empty game object and just assign a particle system to it, or you can just go to game object effects particle system. It makes an empty game object, and then as a component, it puts on a particle system. Also, just to note, here's the trail render that before I moved in, it made like that little trail effect. So trail renders are here as well. Um, so the particle system, so here's the transform. So there's two components, the transformed and the particle system. So this one, so if you notice down here, a bunch of these parameters start off, but there's no header. There's no like subsection. These are generic to the particle system to begin with. So it's like duration. How long does this run, or is it the length of time the particle system is emitting particles? So like the lifespan of the whole system. Then it's like, is it looping, or should it just run once and just stop, or should it constantly go? In this case, it just keeps going. Pre-warm is like sometimes to whatever effect that you want to do it, like, so for example, if you want like water that's constantly shooting up into like a spray, when a particle system first starts, there's no spray above it. It needs to first, from its central point, needs to start spewing particles. So sometimes you don't want the user to see like a particle system warming up, or those initial frames before it starts going into like a constant motion. In this case, where like water is constantly coming out. So you might want to have it be pre-warm. Delays, lifetime, and speed. These are the initial values given to the particles when they first come out. So when this thing is emitting particles at a certain rate, what are those particles' lifetime, their initial velocity, and the delay for them when they first come out? So all these attributes are either of the entire system, or they're of the individual particles that are coming out. The particles usually three. Let me see if I can pause this. So they're usually 2D images that are facing the camera all the time. So no matter where I turn the camera, it looks like these shooting stars or these objects are 3D, because no matter where I look at them, they seem to you're looking at them. They seem to have like depth to them. You can move around and you still see them, but in reality, they're flat images. They just rotate as the camera moves, so it looks like it's always looking at you. So the reason for mostly use cases with particles is using these 2D images, these sprites, is because they're a lot cheaper on the system than 3D objects. Although you could spawn 3D meshes in the same way. They live, their colors might change, their speed might change. You actually might have a light physics simulation where they hit like the floor or the wall and they kind of bounce back. Again, that gets a little expensive, so people kind of focus on this area, um, and they really optimize the situation. But usually it's these 2D graphics, and their billboard. It's called billboarded when they're always oriented toward the camera. Um, and whatever parameters they're giving at the beginning, like their lifetime, their color, their velocity, that can change over time. So that's why you'll see like maybe particles might start as a certain color and really big, and they might get really small and change color over the lifetime. All that type of stuff you can change in these type of submenus down here at the bottom. So let me just close this for a second. These submenus down here, ones that are clicked off are not active, ones that are clicked on are for this particle system. So in this case, emission is turned on. So this means the emission of the particles is going to come out in counts of 5, and there's one cycle. So that's how come there's 5 particles, 5 of these like stars that have like trails behind them. So that means this thing emitted a burst of 5 particles in one cycle. And it looks like these things are just living forever, or a lifetime of 1,000 seconds. So it looks like it's like these are like persistent objects that are just rotating around the center. But they're 5 particles that are part of one particle system that just happen to live forever. So the next thing to look at is the shape of it. So normally, so we have like the shape is a circle, side radius of this. So in this case is the shape of the actual particle system. So normally a particle system also acts as the shape of the emission. So you can have circles, spheres, donuts, boxes, or cubes, rectangles, or you can input in your own mesh. So basically that means the whole surface area is where a particle could be emitted from. So in this case, we have a circle that says space 5 particles out in a uniform manner. But sometimes you'll have like the need so if you have like a rendered mesh, um, and you want particles spewing off all of the parts of it, you might have like a collider underneath that's kind of shaped like the mesh. Maybe it's shaped like a sphere or a box, or you actually input in a custom mesh. And then particles are randomly chosen where they're going to spawn on the position on the surface of that emission shape. So in this case, though, it's very simple. It's just a circle of this radius. And the arc is 360, meaning that everywhere in the full circle is accessible for emission. So this is a burst spread. So we burst out the particles on the whole circle so at once. Was there anything else here? Position. Okay, so it's just rotated 90, just meaning it's flat. So on the ground. So if I undo that, let me try restarting. There we go. There's a bunch of randomization you can do, but this is a very like symmetric thing, so there's no randomization turned on. So the velocity, so right now it's at 3, but if I increase it, there's like 5 and 10. Now they just look like one big object. They're moving so fast. Or I could pop it down to 1. So I noticed their tails get short when they're moving slowly, and long when they're moving quickly. So they must have, okay, they have trails turned on. So down here, another subsystem of trails. And I guess since let's see, lifetime, how long each trail will last relative to life of the particle. So let's see if I increase this by a factor of 10. Yep. So let me try 0.04. So I'm just going to make them live twice as long. So it's like a trail is created in the path that the particle has already moved. So that's why it kind of trails behind the object. It remembers the position that the particle is in, and that's the previous positions of the particle is where the trail inhabits. That's where it's allowed to live. That's why it stays behind the particle. And the longer it lives, the longer it transgressed behind it. So here you can change like the color over the lifetime. the width over the trail. So the color over the lifetime, we could talk, this might be worth talking a little bit about because this gets us into the color menus. So this is saying, so if you've never seen these kind of ticks before, it might be kind of hard to understand what this thing is doing. So if I go over here to this side, let me just bring up the opacity first and see if it does something. Because to me, if I'm reading this, this is saying like opaque white moving to transparency, meaning the color of the trail fades off to invisible after a certain amount of time. So color over lifetime. So the amount that this trail is alive, as it nears the end of its lifetime, it's going to become more invisible. That's why it kind of fades out. It doesn't like solid color and then just like chop off. And then how to mess with these ticks is always worth looking into. So let me see. Wait, I think this one, okay, this is alpha. Yeah. So if I zoom in here, I don't know if I can pause it and change the color and see if they'll be updated real time. So there's some color overlay. The color's not coming in. I'm trying to make it real short. Let's see, color over trail. I'm just trying to see how these colors are blending together for the trail part of it. So the start color is green. I'm just going to bring it to white right now because I just want to see how that's impacting. When you're troubleshooting these things, it's kind of hard. So always look at the top first and then move down. Let's see. Let me just make sure the render is not. You have a health glow shader, a laser green material. Okay, this is kind of yellow. That's why it's a little yellow toned. It's this material here. And let me see if this. Okay, so this color over lifetime seems to be changing it from that start yellow, and if you make it dark, it's like bringing some color. In this case, it's turning to a green. I wanted to see if I could get this alpha coming in. Stretch. No, rotation. The only other like subsystem that's on is I haven't looked at is rotation over lifetime. And that's not going to affect the color. It looks like it's not the rotation around the circle. It's like how much that square, that initial particle in the beginning. Actually, if I turn off the trail for a second, and if I turn off angular velocity 0, you see that these sprites, these 2D graphics are moving around the circle. But if I increase this angular velocity, they start rotating. But they're spherical. They're little circles that are angled toward the camera. So you wouldn't even, the only reason you see this orange outline is because as a developer, it's saying like this is the graphic. It's like this little. If I come down here to the render here, this health glow. Notice how it's like got this little circle and it fades out. So every little sprite is like a little square graphic with alpha built into it. In this case, only like the center of the graphic is visual. It has opacity to it, and then it has this soft fall off, this which makes it feel like this kind of little blurring circle. But the point is that I don't even know why this rotation over lifetime is on, um, because again, it's a symmetrical little blurred circle. You don't even see it when it rotates toward you. Um, but in either case, let me mess around with the trails a little bit and try to wrap up the conversation on this particle system, and then go back to try to find the explosion. So start color white. Okay, it's just that center circle that the white is impacting. So trails. Let me go back to trails for a second. Oh, did I lose? Okay. So this is an interesting, I don't know how I deleted it, but this type of hot pink or magenta um, is actually a debug color. So this is saying when a shader breaks, you'll get that hot pink. That's not on purpose. And so if I look here, it says assign a trail material in the render module. So it must have been when I turned off this subsystem of trails, maybe it removed that material that was just for the trail render. So this underneath here, this render, this health glow one, is meant for that center sphere object, but there needs to be a second material for the trail render. So if I broke it off, let me just see where audio art. So maybe it's under art. Materials, VFX. Forgot what I know. Oh, it was a laser, right? I think it was this laser green. So let me try dragging this back over. Nope, they replaced everything. Just Control Z to undo. Okay, in the renderer module. So that's the health glow. That goes on the particle. That's good. Assign a trail material. Module. Oh, okay. I thought I had the renderer module open. Oh. Billboard, trail material, none. Perfect. So we have a core material which goes on the particle. Then we have a material here that goes on the trail. So that was like a laser green, I think it was. Okay, good. So we're back to having this initial green. So laser green. Oh, it's got an emission. Okay. So let me just talk about, I guess, these materials for a minute. So maybe we'll look at the meshes and the material that we're not going to look at in this class, but we'll look at the meshes and the materials in another class. Just know that for something to render onto the camera, so you have a 3D space, even if it's a 2D game, you're still going to have the same setup. You need a camera to render into the space. Normally, when you play a game in your game view, um, the player's position, the camera is usually parented underneath it. And so as the player is moving around, the camera moves around and it feels like you're actually moving through the world. So when you have the camera in a certain place in the virtual 3D world, it has what's called a fulcrum. Basically, it's like a cone of what the camera can see out in front of it. So it's a cone because we live in perspective, like stuff that stuff that angles away. Yeah. So stuff gets farther out, like the angle gets farther out. So in a fulcrum, you might see it might be like a cut off pyramid where it's really small up top, close to you, and really large out far out. But that's what you can actually, that's your viewing angle, what you can see into the world. Within that viewing angle, so everything gets culled out that's not in that fulcrum. Things that are, so meshes and particle systems, objects that are within that viewing range of the camera will get rendered to the monitor, will get rendered to the screen. So you need a camera, you need some type of meshes, you need a light that actually hits the meshes, because if there's no light, everything is black. Um, and then the meshes need some type of shader or material. So the shader code actually talks about how to render this mesh. Um, and right now we're using these materials. So it's like a little piece of shader code that's wrapped up, and there's some parameters that are exposed that you can tweak. So you can change different colors, you can change alpha, you can change emission, you can change specularity, you can change how the surface characteristics of an object are, so as they get rendered to your screen. So in this case, I'm using laser green, um, and it's the shader behind it is this particles standard unlit. And so there's many different shaders, but the one big one that you should be aware of is called PBR, or physically based rendering. That's the popular one, the most in use these days. Um, and in this case, particles standard unlit, you can have different rendering and blending modes. So if you're not familiar with them, you could think of something like a Photoshop, where you can have multiple layers and how the layers are blended onto each other, or how opaque they are. It's the same idea in shaders. This is just saying that whatever this material is that gets assigned to this object, it's going to be opaque, not have transparent properties. In this case, this one is a multiply. So it's not a normal, it just looks like a solid object. A multiply is like, there's different ones like multiply, lighten, additive. So stuff usually in particles, they'll be like multiply or additive, meaning they'll appear translucent. They'll appear as if they're like see-through. So in this case, this is a particle shader, so the multiply is on. Now, the albedo might be a new term for you. That just means base color, the color of an object. My shirt is gray. My jeans are blue. Emission is the inner luminescence, so the glow. So in this case, with this gun, um, well, these particles are nothing but like, they're very glowy. So there's just a base white color, and the emission color, the glowiness of it, is this green. That's why when I was changing the color parameters on it before, it was like blowing out green. So if I just jump over to the game view, you can see like this gun has this like big glowy green. That's the emission part. So some parts of a mesh, um, so when you assign like albedos and emission and specular characteristics on a surface property of an object, it doesn't need to be the same color over the whole mesh. You can plug in like texture files and get like, oh, this part of the gun is glowy green, but this part is like a shiny metal. But we're not getting into content creation in this class, but you just need to at least know some of these ideas. In this case, we have a laser green material. Behind the material, it's a shader, in this case, a particle standard unlit. You can think of a material as like an instance, a copy of shader code, but nicely wrapped up for developers, for users, and only parts of the shader are exposed. In this case, like the albedo, the base color, the emission, and some other characteristics like tiling. Just want to say, if I were to edit my project to Model 3 weapons, that'd be fine. My earlier thoughts were changing both the explosion. Right. Yeah, there's many different moving parts to this. You have the gun, you have the particles, you have the explosions, or kind of the secondary VFX systems on the particle. So that's fine. Remember last class I was saying last week, the first week when you move into a project, you might really start to open your eyes to like, whoa, my goal was, I'm really starting to understand what the details of my work are. This might be too much. You might actually change your project idea that first week. So yes, the student was asking if it's okay to change. Yes, just go back in, edit your description. It's much better to do this now as you start working than like in the third week, like a week before it's all due. In any case, so we have a material that's on the trail render. We have a material that's on that kind of center particle. The only issue I have with this particle system is that the trail render is already kind of tinted green um, within the shader itself. So when I go up here and try to change the color over the trail or color over lifetime, notice how I'm going down to black, but now the trail render is like super green. And that's because the shader isn't like neutral, isn't like defaulted to like a white or something where you can override to any color spectrum. There's already a color tint in the shader, in the material. So there's only so much I can change the parameters up top in the particle system. I would have to go down, completely change the material. I haven't hunted through this project, so I don't know if there's like a laser. To me, it doesn't look like there's a laser white, but if there was, I would have grabbed that. I could try using the health glow, but it seems to be like, notice how the little texture on the laser glow is like the whole square is like a solid yellow. It's a solid color, whereas the particle has a transparency, a fall off. So my only concern is that if I'll try to plug this health glow into the trail, and yeah, it's the whole thing is, oh wait, color over trail. Let me bring everything up to white. Okay, I'm seeing something, but you see how it's like really faded out. Maybe if I amp up the alpha. Nah. I could try increasing the size of the trail, but up to 1. Uh, 6. Or the width. So these curves are actually super useful. So notice as I change one side of this curve, it's going from a trail that's going thick to thin. As I'm changing this curve, it's staying the same thickness. Or I could even reverse it, and it goes from thin to thick. In this case, that doesn't make much sense, but just know that besides turning off toggles and changing enumeration lists and changing float values, you can change. They'll give you access to colors and these curves to change a value over time. And I'll just default this back. The only other thing over color, what I originally wanted to show you is that these ticks, so much like the animation curve that I was just messing with, is like a change of value over time. this gradient editor is saying color over lifetime. So the left side is the start when it first exists. It has a full opacity, and it's tinted white. And then when it dies at the end of its lifetime, the opacity is 0. That's what the little checker means. It means there's no color there. But if I ramp up the color here, and or the alpha, I should say, and just change the color, maybe it'd be easier for you to see what this graph is doing. So this is saying when the particle or the trail first exists, it'll be white. When it dies, I want it to move to red. And this top tick here, if you click on it, is how much alpha. I just raised that just to show it. You can click in the middle, or I'm sorry, at the top bottom, and you can create like another tick. So if it made sense for whatever reason over the lifetime, it would go from white to blue to red. And the lifetime is indicated in the top part here. Now I'm going to go back and hunt for the actual explosion VFX, but I'll pause here. Is there any other questions on just the basics of how these VFX systems are running? So when you first create one, it'll just be shooting up a few. I don't want to change this prefab that much, but if I say just game object effects particle system, this is the default behavior. So again, that orange outline is just saying that this is the edging of the little sprite graphic. The player doesn't actually see that. It's just shooting particles up. There's no gravity. They have an initial velocity of y, positive, and then some randomness on x and z, so they come up in this cone shape. Okay, good. The explosion. I'll move to that in a second. And then there's this playback system. So it's particle systems actually have their own time. I don't want to say range or value, but like, so the game simulation has its own central time that's running, and the physics system is connected to that as well. Particle systems have their own timeline, because you have to simulate them and change them and mess around with them a lot. That's what this thing, the bottom right, is here. So it's simulating what the particle system would look like at runtime if you chose to spawn it. And again, these are the default settings. You go through here and change this. So the start color, we can move to red. You can turn on a gravity modifier. I think we're in metric system, so 9.8 is standard gravity. But if I kind of just do 4, you can kind of see that they're given an initial velocity upwards, and then gravity's pulling them down. And let's see, max. So emission, we're emitting 10 over, I think that's 10 over a second. So we can increase it, say like, that's what 200 looks like. So now we're getting like a fountain of blood. So the thing I wanted to get across is when you're thinking about building a VFX system, so if you shoot somebody and a big blood splurt comes out, or if you shoot a grenade on a wall and there's like a pipe, that part of the gameplay is you want to fracture it and all of a sudden it starts spraying out steam or water. It's a whole skill set to like know how to make really good looking VFX. And you kind of move through it step by step. You kind of think about what the objects, the particles, if it's steam, water, fire, blood, how do they look and act in the real world, and then you seek to recreate that. If you have a specific idea, there's always a tutorial. Somebody's already done it, and then it's always worth looking up how other people have approached but you move through it step by step. You're like, oh, I want gravity to impact it. The particles are too big, too small. Are they representing just blood droplets or like huge splatters of blood? Um, and then that can help you like move through these subsystems, which to turn on, which to turn off, and then all the little tweaking variables of them. But you kind of have to keep moving and iterating. There's no like set solution right away. But anyway, that's the particle system. So let me delete that. And the next one we're looking at was disk explosion range. Oh, these are, sorry, these aren't prefabs. I mean materials. Oh, I think you're on a material just like I was. I don't see an actual prefab for disk explosion range. Yep, but here, this is it. So under FPS, prefabs, VFX, and VFX disk range. So if I play that, this happens to be a one-off here. It looks like the time of the whole system's about 2 seconds. Yeah, duration 2. So if I click play, this explosion happens, but notice in our simulated timeline, it runs till 2, and then it restops. And this is not looping. We have a little delay, lifetime, and speed. Let's see, start size really big, simulation speed 1, max particles 1,000. I just wanted to pause it. All right, these look all like sprites, and they look like little triangle parts. So wireframe cage is the shader. I just want to look at the render. Mesh it's using is this platonic. Okay, looks like it's this. So platonic solids are like these geometric solids. So it's taking it, I think it's taking in a whole mesh and actually rupturing it. Render mode mesh. Yeah, it's this platonic mesh. It's got this wireframe material on all the faces on it. Let's see. So emission, it makes one on one cycle. So it looks like it's just emitting one object. So it's a rigid body. So there's rigid body and soft body physics. So soft body, you've seen those rag dolls when like an enemy dies, it looks like a rag doll and they throw it. The soft body dynamics are usually really expensive. You don't really see too much of that. Rigid body is your meshes just don't deform. So if you take a sphere and you drop it on the floor, it just, I'm sorry, it just bounces. It doesn't like deform, it doesn't push in. The vertices stay as they are, it just acts kind of like a ball. It bounces without a squish or stretch and pull. Rigid body is a relatively much cheaper form of physics simulation that you can run. So this, I'm going to say that this is set up to almost take this mesh that comes into the particle system. So if I just look at the mesh real quick here, this says there's 240 vertices that make up 120 triangles. So some quick, we only have a few minutes, and let's wrap this up. So in computer graphics, for 3D computer graphics, the terminology that you need to know are vertices, edges, and they call them either polygons, polygonal faces, or faces. So in this case, if I zoom up here, there's a vertex, 2 vertices make a line or an edge. 3 edges are at least needed to make a face or a polygonal face. And that's also a triangle. So most of the time in game graphics, you'll see triangles or quads. Quads are just rectangles. So when you model, use a modeling package, or you use a prototyping package within Unity, and you're making actual 3D models, they'll look like quads, rectangles, not triangulated. It's easier to make the modeling tools work on quads, but when you render, everything that goes through into the graphics card only works on vertices and triangles. So I do a lot of procedural modeling at work, and I think the modeling class is going to be more procedural based. You actually work with arrays of vertices and arrays of triangles, and triangles are wound. They're the order that they're listed are in a clockwise manner. I get into why that is, but if you look at this object in the bottom right, you should see it's composed of triangles. Um, and that's what this 240 vertices of 120 triangles makes up this mesh. And I think what's happening here is it's taking all these triangles that used to be sewn in place, that they're kind of just sitting there on the mesh, they kind of get their own rigid body, and they kind of get a velocity added to them, and all the triangle parts are just exploding outward. So color over lifetime, speed over lifetime, I'm not going to look at that. I'm looking for anything that might give me an indication that this is how it's working. It's breaking up the mesh. Limit velocity over lifetime. No, it's not gonna. It's being the emission shape is a sphere. That's fine. It's only one big object coming out of it. It doesn't matter. Emission is just one object. Yeah. Render mode. Mesh. Yeah, so it's taking one object and blowing it apart. So what exactly you want to do to this thing? And then it's fading out the color. Yeah, the color is going to alpha. See it's going to alpha there. There might be this shape here, is it? Oh, my bad. There's multiple particle systems in here. Okay, shrapnel's small, impact ring. All right, I'll continue. I'll wrap up this. There's actually, so just to wrap this up, if I just pause it, it's right at the beginning. Okay. So there's like 4 VFX systems going on here. So that cage, that platonic solid I was talking about, is that big circular glow that fades out really quickly. That right now has the orange outline on it, and then there's pieces. I thought the mesh was being blown apart. It's not. So there's a whole bunch of shrapnel parts underneath it, and then small parts, and then there's this impact ring, like this glow coming out. So there's 4 parts to it. So if you let me know, I'll review this the beginning of next class. But if you just let me know like what exactly your ideas of trying to change it, we'll see if we can change it. But there's 4 parts to it. All right. So I'm going to stop the video, and I'll get the video up in a few hours, and I'll see you on Friday. Yeah. Do you want on the video or no? Do you want it?